And I went in the bathroom, and luckily there was a lock on the door. And I locked the door and I yelled out, I will only come out under 2 conditions. 1, I will have the baby in my arms, or 2, my doctor arrives.
Welcome to Positive Birth Story Podcast. Today we're going to talk with Debra Pascali-Bonaro. She's the director of Orgasmic Birth movie, and today she's going to share with us her juicy and empowering details about her rebellious orgasmic birth and some empowering and encouraging information and tips for you mamas. I have this phrase right now that's so bright in my mind, and it says, birth is a sacred medicine.
Yeah. What powerful.
Yes. And honoring that opportunity, really honoring and seeing it and inviting it and consciously into our lives, not giving it away. Like, it's such an amazing chance to heal. Why would we give it away into someone else's hands and miss it? Of course, all of us are going through our own things, and we're all ready. When we are ready, the teacher is ready as well for us.
Yes.
But then, people like us, doulas and midwives, spreading this knowledge and making it available. It's so important.
So important.
Yeah. Raising that awareness. What was the pivotal point for you personally? Because maybe you knew it from the beginning, since ever you were a child and you grew up like this, knowing that birth can be different, knowing that it's not just medicalized. Maybe it's mother who passed that knowledge to you. Maybe something happened. So can you please share a little bit? How did you come to know that birth can be orgasmic and ecstatic?
So I really learned this from my great-grandmother.
Oh.
So when I was a little girl, my great-grandmother was in her 80s, and she was a short, kind of round woman. And overall, she was very quiet. So she would add her voice at certain times, but when I would ask her birth stories, she lit up, right? Like, birth is a day we never forget. And like, seeing her tell her story in her 80s, as a little girl, I couldn't picture her as a 20-year-old woman giving birth. I just saw this 88-year-old woman, like, alive with birth. But she told it in such a beautiful way. She gave birth to 8 children at home and in different locations as they moved around, and the last one kind of very close to where I live now. Mm-hmm. And they had a farm, and she talked about walking and working the land in labor until she couldn't be upright so much anymore, and she would go in and the midwife would arrive. But she always would get up, and if you can picture her, so old and round and slow, and she would waddle over to the kitchen sink and put her hands on the sink and tip her head back and go into like a supported squat and talk about how the midwife would catch and then hand the baby up between her legs. And the later babies came before the midwife, right? And so my grandmother, the oldest daughter, would get down and catch the baby and pass it up. And here's this old woman with an imaginary baby coming in her hands, and she would bring it to her chest. And the joy, I still can feel it in my body when I tell it, of what she lit up with such love and oxytocin. And she talked about hard work. She talked about challenge. She talked about intensity. She never once said to me pain. But what she said to me is, all the work is so worth it when that baby slides from your body to your hands and up to your breast. She said, it's like you've conquered the world and the love explodes. And that just stayed with me from a little girl. And I listened to my grandmother's stories, and she gave birth during wartime, and she had a home birth, but now we had lost our midwives in America. So she gave birth at the home of the doctor. And even though it was a home, the doctor told her a little bit more what to do. And even as a young girl, I could sense the difference in the power from my great-grandmother, who was like the star. This was her birth, her power, this quiet little lady, but she stood in it. My grandmother, who had a beautiful birth, but was told a little bit more and deferred some of her power. And my mother gave birth to me at a time where the hospital system was really entrenched. And luckily, her mother and grandmother wouldn't let her go to the hospital till she was fully dilated. And they kept her home and kept her moving. And so she only got there and gave birth to me 20 minutes later. But she gave birth alone. No one could be with her, not even my dad. And although I sensed her labor was strong and powerful, I sensed how sad it was for her to have a system literally put her down physically and emotionally in just the last moments, right? So when it was time for me to give birth, I had lessons from 3 generations where in my own family, I saw the transition from basically home to birth center to hospital. And so I already had such wisdom about what I wanted and how I wanted to advocate for birth. And after my own births, I met women and they didn't know the stories of their great-grandmothers. They didn't know any positive stories, and their stories were fear and pain. So for me, orgasmic birth was born in my great-grandmother's stories, into my own of really claiming my power and having very joyful, loving, intentional births. And then starting to support many other families and watching other people claim what they wanted in birth and really support them to find their path and to have positive stories, whether that entails challenge, which many do, or pain or fear, but to find the joy in their own way. And I truly was asleep one night with all these years of wisdom going on, and I had a dream about making a film. And I never in my conscious awake mind ever thought of doing that. But in that subconscious, I thought, we have to get the message out to more people that there's so much more in birth than we've ever talked about. So I'm grateful for my great-grandmother's wisdom. I'm grateful that my dream took me to say, let's make a documentary that shows that there's so much more in birth than what most people know.
Such a legacy from your grandma. Yeah. Great-grandma.
Great-grandma.
Yeah. Yeah, she's probably so happy. Not even probably, for sure. She's so happy and she's so proud of you. And it feels like those seeds were planted back then. And now she's behind you and showing you the way and really supporting you.
100%.
Yeah, you feel her, right?
Oh, I feel her all the time as I'm doing this work. And I will share with you, in my first birth, I was in Canada, and Canada didn't have any midwives at that point. And the traditional midwives were under threat of jail. And so even though I connected with midwives, if they supported me, they could potentially go to jail, so they couldn't. So I had to navigate to find someone that would support me in a way that was very different than the medical system was
Thank
at the
God
time.
It's not the situation right now.
Now Canada is doing very well with midwives and really options of home and birth center and hospital. But my only option in 1981 was hospital birth. But I found a young resident who had not attended any births yet. And I said to him, please, because you haven't been indoctrinated in a dysfunctional model, we can navigate this together. So we had a beautiful journey. He was ready to support me in moving and just really having a more physiologic, joyful birth. And he was across town in another hospital in the operating room when I got to the hospital in active labor. And the nurses said to me, I don't care what you've determined, we're going to literally hook you up. and put you down in bed. And like, I was like, oh no. And this is before cell phones or anything. Like, I couldn't reach him. So I did the only thing I could think of. I said, I need to go to the toilet before you hook me up. And I went in the bathroom, and luckily there was a lock on the door, and I locked the door and I yelled out, I will only come out under 2 conditions. 1, I will have the baby in my arms, or 2, my doctor arrives. Because in that little bathroom, there was a sink, and all I could do was lean on it and sing and dance. And my great-grandmother had transitioned on a few years earlier, but I called her to be with me, and I felt her presence so strong with me, and her wisdom and her belief in birth. And I knew she believed in me, and I believed in my body's ability to birth. And so I labored for a long while alone in this bathroom. They threatened to bring psychiatric. They wanted to bring someone to cut the lock off. But luckily, there was a knock on the door. I don't even know how long it was, because in labor, you're in such liminal space. Yes. And the voice said, Debra, how did I know when they told me there's a crazy woman locked in the bathroom in labor and delivery, it would be you? And I opened the door and kind of fell into his arms. And he had actually, they let him know, and he got someone else to take over the surgery and really came to support me in the birth that I desired. And so my great-grandmother really has been with me in so many ways.
What a blessing, and thank you for your rebellious spirit to do that, so that now you could tell that story and share it. And I'm sure how well it affected everything else that you've been doing in life, because you found that strength, you found that rebellious spirit to say no, right? Even back then, when the situation was so bad with doctors and nurses making women do things that they didn't want, like literally making them really say no.
Correct. There was no such thing as like informed decision making. Nobody asked consent. They just said do it. Like we're the authority, or I don't know. Yeah. So my great-grandmother's story, right? Like, I think we underestimate the power of stories. Yes. And I often think about, if I didn't have her stories, would I have just laid down and turned my body over to medicine? I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing today. Her story changed my birth and changed my life.
I think it's really worth for every woman to ask and inquire about her great-grandma's story, if that's accessible. Yeah. Because back then, when the medical system was not as pushy, many women were giving birth at home.
Yes.
A lot of them were empowered, and they could really do it themselves, and without any interventions, without any pushing energy around. So it's really worth going back, asking your grandma, or maybe asking your grandma how she was born. Hopefully she would know.
Yes, and asking other elder women. Like, women love to tell their birth story. Doesn't matter if you're, 80 years old. You tell your story like it was yesterday. Yes. And something that happened to me here in Bali. A few years back, I was at a sacred ceremony, as you know, for a full day. I was the only Westerner with some of the village people. And they broke us into groups, which often will happen, of the women that no longer bleed, hold a sacred space. So I got to be with other wise women that no longer bleed. And because it was a long day of chanting and ceremony, we had time in between to talk. And I asked everyone their birth story, because every story has such wisdom, and every person loves to tell their story. And no matter if it was positive or challenging, it's always an opportunity to learn more and to heal. And several of the women that day, when I said, would you share your story? Is it, I didn't want to offend anyone if that's not culturally okay. They kind of got very quiet and said, but I'm a little bit shy because I didn't birth in the hospital. And I said, I want to hear even more, right? Yes. But they felt like shame, because hospital birth has become so much the norm and perceived as almost the right thing to do. Yeah. And so I wanted to hear their story. And do you know where they birthed? Here, locally, in the river. And they had so much shame that they labored. They didn't always birth in the water, but they labored in the water. And they knew that water, especially then, the water was cleaner, and that what a amazing comfort measure and healing. And so you don't have to often go far to find people, if they're willing, to share these stories. And I think it helped them. All of a sudden, they all started telling, right? And there was, instead of the shame that they might have carried that their birth wasn't in a medical environment, I hope I helped them to see what power their stories had and encourage them to tell them to the young women and the pregnant women. So wherever you get your stories, it's so important.
Thank you. I'm sure you gave a good start to them sharing their birth stories with their grandchildren, granddaughters who are about to give birth, and unlocked that shame. Yeah. So thank you for inquiring and asking them that. Yeah. If you could share with women 3 things, let's make it 3 things that they could do during pregnancy that could bring them into more pleasurable and ecstatic birth experience. Something perhaps in their daily practice, in their mindset.
Yeah. So I think that's a good summary question. What are 3 things? And I would kind of take it from all that we've done. I think the first is to reflect back. What is your kind of thoughts of birth? How were you born? How were your family's births? What are the stories that you've heard? Maybe even from media and that. And so if you were to just quickly write down for each person listening or watching 3 words that you think about birth, put them down and say, are those really the 3 words that you want to bring into your birth? Or is there healing needed? And how can you start your own healing journey? So that's kind of my first starting point with people. The next is create a pleasure practice. Really, if we're going to look for a more joyful, loving, pleasurable birth, start it in pregnancy. Make a list of 10 or 20 simple pleasures, and then start using at least 3 every day. And don't forget the long ones. I know life doesn't every day give us time for longer pleasures, but make sure at least a few times a week, if you can, have those longer pleasures and make that list and incorporate them in. And then my third thing in really preparing for an orgasmic birth is learn about your own anatomy of pleasure. Where did your sexual education come from? Do you feel you got good knowledge about your body and pleasure and orgasm from school, from your family? And if you're like the majority of people, I get the answer is no to both of those, then where has your knowledge about your own sacred anatomy come from? And if it hasn't happened, then this is the time in pregnancy to seek those teachers, those books, grab a mirror, honor your yoni, really look at her and take a journey on all the sacred parts and start exploring and saying, how can I bring myself pleasure? And what are ways that you can understand that anatomy of pleasure in birth? Because when we bring healing, when we begin to have pleasure, when we understand our yonis and our sacred anatomy, we can totally transform not only birth, but that extends into parenting, because now you have your own pleasure capacity heightened. And not only do you need it in birth, but parenting is a journey. Many highs and many lows and many challenges. So really knowing yourself and having these healing and these tools is really a lifelong skill. So I encourage everyone to really do that. And of course, the fourth would be normal childbirth education. We need to understand the anatomy, the physiology, and that. But if you only just do the basics on birth, I think a lot of times you get the basics of birth in what you receive in birth. If you want to go to extraordinary, you have to go to a deeper journey and really put the time in. And what it gives you is not only, I pray, a joyful, pleasurable birth, but that it transforms how you enter parenthood, motherhood, fatherhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debra, from the bottom of my heart, of being an ambassador of this sacred knowledge, of this sacred wisdom. Thank you for empowering thousands of women around, not only birthing women, but also birth workers, doulas, midwives. We make this world a better place for the future generation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Taking your time, sharing. I'm so grateful. I hope that this interview, that this podcast, that this, what we're talking about, will reach a lot of people, and will inspire and empower. And the world is slowly, step by step, effort by effort, orgasm by orgasm,
yes,
is becoming a better and more pleasurable place for all of us to thrive as families, as women, as men, as couples, and as someone who creates this planet.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been...